Hi everyone, welcome to the first video on my YouTube channel. This is going to serve as an introduction to scalable vector graphics. It's going to be the first part of an ongoing series where I talk about SVG, introduce the concepts, introduce how to use them, and how to script them, how to make fun things with SVG. So why me? My name is Rob Larsen. I'm an experienced front-end engineer, author, and open source contributor. I'm the co-author of Professional jQuery many years ago, the author of Beginning HTML and CSS, the author of The Uncertain Web from O'Reilly, the author of Mastering SVG, which is the context for this, and co-author of the HTML and CSS workshop, the first volume of that. I didn't work on the second volume. I'm a longtime open source contributor. I currently maintain HTML5 boilerplate and front-end developer interview questions, and I administer the H5BP organization on GitHub. As well as that, I do smaller personal projects that I share as open source, and so hopefully you check that stuff out as well. So what are we going to cover in this first video? We're going to answer the question, what is SVG? We're going to create an SVG image, your first SVG image. We're going to add an SVG file to an HTML document. We're going to look at the concept of drawing with code. And then we're going to embed an SVG element in an HTML document, which is where this stuff really becomes powerful. So what is SVG? SVG is an XML-based markup language used to define images. Defined in 1999, SVG took a long time to gain traction as browser support was limited until the 2010s. These days, it's widely supported and you can use SVG everywhere. Since it's a markup language, if you know HTML, you can jump right in with SVG using familiar concepts and structures. Your first SVG image. Here we go. Example SVG. The following code sample shows the basic structure of an SVG image. Let's walk through it. Again, if you're familiar with HTML, this should be pretty familiar to you. You're just using a new set of elements and attributes to define stuff. First element is the standard XML declaration indicating that the document should be parsed as XML. If you've ever worked with XML as the response from a server, it's the same sort of thing that you would get if you inspected that server response. Next up is the root SVG element. This is the root element of an SVG document, equivalent to the HTML element in an HTML document. There are many possible attributes for the SVG element. Here we are using 4. Height and width define the intrinsic dimensions of the document. The XML-NS XML namespace attribute is a reference to the schema that defines this XML element. The view box will be covered in depth in a later video in this series. Briefly, it defines the coordinate plane of the SVG document. The top left coordinate is 0, 0, and the bottom right coordinate is 250 and 100, which maps to the height and width of the image. Other things can be done with the viewbox. It's very powerful. There will be a whole video on viewbox in the future. The single child of the SVG element is a text element. The text element also has many possible attributes. We'll eventually cover the most common use cases for all attributes of all the common SVG elements, but for now we're focusing on just a small subset. In this case, there are 4 attributes related to the display of the element. The X and Y attributes represent the position of the top left corner of the text element as points on a coordinate plane. Font family maps to the familiar CSS property of the same name. It defines the typeface that should be used for the text. Font size also maps to the common CSS property and defines the size of the font. This is the example.svg file rendered in a web browser. It's not very exciting, but hopefully you understood everything that was going on there, and you can see where we're going to start to go with this. Embedding an SVG image in an HTML document. All you need to do to embed an SVG image in an HTML document is set it as the source of the very familiar image element. It's that simple. This is a trend with SVG. So much of it is familiar, and you're using the same concepts that you've been using for a long time if you've been working with HTML to work with SVG. Now we're going to look at drawing with code. Well, the first element we looked at, the text element, it's useful. SVG is exciting because it allows you to draw with code. Let's take a look at a simple example that illustrates the basics. In this SVG element, there are 4 circle elements. Each has 4 attributes. Cx, or center x, is the x-coordinate of the center of the circle. Cy, or center y, is the y-coordinate of the center of the circle. R is the radius of the circle. Fill is the fill color of the circle, in this case defined using the RGBA notation, red, blue, green, alpha. This is the circles.svg rendered in a web browser. And as you can see, with just those elements, we've added circles to the page, and we've added transparency, and we've added all kinds of fun things. And it was very simple and very straightforward. Adding an SVG element directly into an HTML document. So this is adding an SVG element just like you would add a table or a paragraph or a div or any other HTML element. You can do that with SVG, which is great. So here we go in this example. As you can see, instead of including it as the source of an image element, you can embed an SVG element directly into an HTML document. The SVG element is then part of the DOM, the document object model, and can be manipulated alongside other elements on the page using JavaScript. This is a very powerful aspect of SVG, and we will go into much detail on this powerful feature in many later videos in this series. We'll talk about manipulating SVG with vanilla JavaScript, and then we'll talk about libraries like D3. This is the embedded SVG element from circles.html rendered in a web browser. So what have we learned in this first video? Key takeaways. SVG is an XML-based markup language defined to create images. SVG is defined using the familiar pattern of attributes and elements that you know from HTML. Embedding SVG in a page can be done one of two ways, as the source of an image element or directly in the HTML code. Thank you. So I have some links up on the screen. They'll be in the description. My blog, which is kind of on ice, but I'm actually revisiting it right now because I'm doing this sort of content. My GitHub, so that's where you can see my open source work. I'm on LinkedIn, and the code and slides for this are on GitHub. So if you want to take a look at the examples, look at the slides, look at my notes, you can check them out there. All of the code and slides for everything I do on this channel will end up on GitHub, so it's always available for you to look at. So thanks. If you made it this far, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. This is the first video for this channel, so any views are great. If you haven't, please like and subscribe. If you like this sort of content, definitely subscribe, because I'm going to continue to work on SVG, both in terms of this kind of basic lessons, and I'm going to share some more advanced coding that I've done, because I do a lot of coding in SVG for fun and do interesting visualizations and stuff like that. I'm going to do deep dives into those as well. So yeah, thank you. And, I'll see you in the next one where we're going to talk more about SVG.